This video will look at more operations we could perform on the slot table, such as moving groups around and extra information that we could add as part of a group. So let's recall how we could create groups. We could use the slot table builder, and the builder takes in an instance of an address space. And what this does internally is that it creates me a page with 64 empty slots. This is the group address space. I could add groups to this from the top to the bottom linearly. So this is an example of how to add a group. I'm calling the start group method, which takes in a key. I'm providing an arbitrary value of 37. Start group and end group methods pair together to form one single group. This is what it looks like. This group has an address, which is the hex value of 0 and a key of 37. I could add parent groups and child groups to this slot, to this page. A group has metadata such as what's the parent, what's the child, and any primitive and reference values it has. The other information, which is really useful for recompositions, are group flags that I could add. There are 10 types of group flags, and here are some of them. We'll look at how to add the is recomposition required flag, which is really useful. How do I add this flag? So suppose I had this group we just looked at. The way I could add a flag is by using the add flags method, and I'm adding the is recomposition required flag just like this. If I want to add multiple flags, I could call this method again and again for each flag that I want to add. So this is what it looks like. How do I go about removing this flag if I need to? So a slot table has an editor that I could access using the edit method like this. And inside of there, I could call the remove flags method just like this. Is recomposition required as the parameter. And that will make the flags null. So I could add multiple flags, and this is really a list. So we looked at how to add this information. But now let's look at how do you move groups around? How do you transfer groups around from offsets? So suppose I wanted to transfer the location of a group. For example, I want to move the group at offset 3 all the way up to offset 1. How do I do that? I could also do this in the editor. So this is how I do it. So start group. Right there is my first group, and when I call that method, it will increment the pointer and go to offset 1, and I want to move group number 3 to it. How do I do that? So the argument to move group method is offset, which means that I want to move the group at, which is 2 offsets down, which is in this case group number 3, all the way up to its location. And when I perform that operation, this is what it's going to do. It's going to swap basically the groups. So if I try to go to a location outside where there isn't a group, I'm going to get an error. For example, at offset number 4, I don't have any group there at all. I'm going to get an error that offset parameter is out of bounds. I can also move groups between slot tables. Suppose I had not just one slot table, I had 2 slot tables. I had a source slot table, which has one single group of 10 and has 2 primitive values of 100 and 200. I want to maintain this information about its primitive values. I want to maintain all of the metadata about the group, but I want to maintain it while moving it to a different slot table. How do I do that? Suppose I want to move this group to this slot table, which is the destination, which has its own hierarchy of start and of a parent and child, and I want to maintain that hierarchy and be able to plug in and insert a group to a particular location. In this case, I want to insert it to offset number 2. How do I go about transferring this group from offset 0 all the way to offset number 2 in my destination slot table? I could use the editor in my destination slot table, and the start group marks the first group. This is the second group right there. And then I could do move from, and I could use the move from method, which takes in 2 parameters. The first one is the source slot table, and the second parameter is the group that I want to move from it, which is in this case a root group, which is what root handle means. And this will move, as you can see, group number 0 to offset number 2. So that's how you move groups around between slot tables. How do I remove a group? I could also do this through the editor. Suppose I want to remove group number 1. How do I do that? I could use the editor, and I could start with the first group. This will increment the pointer and then go to the second slot, which is offset number 1. And I could call a method like remove group. I could also recall from a previous video, I could print information such as the group key and group flags that are at that location. So in this editor, I could go from the top to the bottom, traverse groups, and I can remove them, skip them, as we have seen. In the next videos, we're going to look at initial composition. We're going to look at the component, which is the composer that is in charge of creating these groups. We're going to look at what is a restart group. We're going to look at the API of the composer and the role it plays in the initial composition process. We're going to do that with an example. And thank you. If you want to learn more about Kotlin, Compose, and coroutines, check out my website with codingwithmohit.com.